Hello, BookTube. I've got a Monday Reads for you, a whole bunch of books I want to go through. It reminded me, when I was looking at them all here, it reminded me of a comment that one of you actually made in an email, a viewer on this channel made, she mentioned that the holidays had been extremely restful for her. And I wrote back and said, well, gee, that's good, but it's awful odd. Aren't holidays usually the opposite of restful? And she wrote back and said, no, I meant restful for my TBR because you weren't around. So let's correct that as fast as we can. So I'm going to just go through these, and we'll start with some rereads. We'll do, I think, half rereads and half new stuff. And the first reread is a recent Brattle find. It's a gem. It's from almost 100 years ago. It's Richardson White's The Gardener's Bed book. He was words won't be able to convey what a wonderful person he was, what a thoroughly wonderful person he was, and what a delight he is to read. I'm sure that he is completely gone now and will never come back, none of his books. But he was an old typewriter hack and never wrote any bad prose, and he was for a long time, like 40 years, the editor of House and Garden, which is it's the UK edition of Better Homes and Gardens, the American magazine Better Homes and Gardens, where it's just basically that, the delights of the home, spreads, the to-dos of the wealthy, gardening tips, cooking recipes, that sort of thing. He was the editor there forever, just for decades. And the whole time he was also an avid gardener, of course, and he kept a gardening diary of just little thoughts here and there, not necessarily always or even mostly connected with gardening. It was a garden themed journal that he kept, and he made it into a book in 1928 or 29, something like that, and it became a hit. People loved it. And I loved it too. I read this, a copy from a library a billion years ago, and really, really liked it, and thought, well, you know, if I'm ever going to see a copy of that I can actually buy, it will be at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, and that's exactly where I did see it. And it's just set up for the year, and it's just a year-long assembly of dates, and for each date there's a thought, and some of the thoughts have to do with gardening, but a lot of them don't. He wanders all over the place, and he gives a charming justification of his book in the preface. I want to read it to you, just give you a taste, because you're never gonna encounter Richardson Wright, and you're never gonna see him, and you're never gonna hear anybody else talk about him. So I thought I'd give you just a taste of what he's like. This is his preface, which is called "How to Read in Bed and Still Remain Happily Married." Some years ago, I made a serious investigation among people who had survived the first trying 7 years of married life as to what brought on their first spat. Invariably, they confessed to having struck this initial reef when one wanted to read in bed and the other wanted the light out. The first 6 months, the solicitous admonition runs, "Dear, you'll strain your eyes if you read any longer." The next 6 months, it goes wearily, "Don't you think you ought to stop reading now?" The subsequent 6, "Isn't it time to put out the light?" Finally, after the second year, that voice barks, "Put out that light." And if, after this, some solution for reading in bed isn't found, the male of the species had better quietly begin saving up alimony. Now, the solution is simple. Read her or him to sleep first. The droning of your voice having proven completely soporific, then quietly pull out your own book from under the pillow, and, lest you should be suddenly caught and have to clamp the book shut and snap off the light without finishing the train of thought, let your own book be in little pieces, small morsels that can be snatched surreptitiously, such as this bed book. And it, of course, never occurred to our author that there is one other solution, which is to marry a reader. But one way or another, I remember I will delight in rereading this thing. But if I remember correctly, it was mostly the fun of it for me at the time was mostly the historical observations, the odd magpie quotes and thoughts that strike the author at any point in the given year. It's only now, in the winter of 2019. That I will have a second motive for rereading this book, which is, of course, that I'm planning to start a garden myself in the spring. So who knows, I might come across a stray note that's of interest. And then this next one, also from the Brattle, also a find, also long since time I reread. This is Modern Library only, and it has the familiar look of a Modern Library, at least one stage of their design, but it's a paperback instead of a hardcover. It's a trade paperback. in this modern library format, which I just love. And this is Midnight Oil and A Cab at the Door, two great slim memoirs by V.S. Pritchett, who the viewers of this channel will have to consider their second favorite Christian Science Monitor book reviewer. Okay. He wrote a ton of boring novels. He wrote a ton of really good essays. He wrote a ton of really good short stories. And sometimes you will actually see the collected essays and the collected short stories in two 1,500-page volumes. And what I wouldn't give to have either one of those. I see them all the time, and I get them and give them away. And at the moment, I don't think I have either one. And I should have the essays, because it's all book work. It's all the stuff he did for the Monitor. Walking up the same street that I do, going into the same building that I do. But this is it's both of his great memoir volumes in one paperback. That's fantastic. I've been meaning to reread them, and I was just assuming that I would find them in some clunky hardcover or other. But here, this is a perfect format for them, so that's great. Then we'll keep on with the rereadings here, but this is all the rest of the stuff will be new. So the next 4 books that are rereadings will be new, including one that is a reread from very recently. I didn't read the advance copy until just a little while ago. So I will be rereading I just got the finished copy, and I'll be rereading that hard on the heels of my first reading. And that's Golden State by Ben Winters. And this is a novel set in a slightly science fiction future in the state, the country, the separate country called Golden State. California has become its own country, as opposed to becoming 5 states in the United States, which it really should do. And in this new world, lying is illegal, completely illegal. Any kind of lying is illegal. And our main character, an enormous giant of a young man with a red beard that he says he wears not because he wants to look frightening, but because he's too lazy to shave. He is one of the deputized people, deputized by the state to not only detect lying, he can feel it in the air, but also to punish it, and he is, by virtue of his authority, allowed to lie. And I read this just a little while ago and thought it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Not the reaction I was expecting at all because of the gimmicky premise. You know, you hear a premise is gimmicky, is that you think, okay, well the author is probably left his douchebag hipster cafe just full of himself with joy at having come up with that premise. He's not going to think he needs to do anything else, but that didn't turn out to be true. So I'm going to reread it now that I have the finished copy and see if that wonderful first impression holds true, or if I start to notice more warts. We shall see. It could go either way. This next one is a Penguin reprint. This is Building the Great Society by Joshua Zeitz. This is Lyndon Johnson, inside the Johnson White House. It's about the Great Society programs, the Great Society legislation, the raft of legislation that he and only he could ever have gotten through Congress. But when I read it when it first came out, the thing that impressed me about it was not so much that, although this is a great account of the Great Society and that legislature and what it meant in society and what the obstacles were, but rather the Johnson White House just in general. This is a terrific, readable, very energetic portrait of the Johnson White House just in general. So looking forward to rereading it, absolutely. Then this next one is a pure example of a triumph of redesign, in my opinion. This is a hardcover that I read. I got the advance copy. We saw it on this channel. I read it. It was just blah for me. It didn't do anything for me at all. And that bugged me, because although the novel didn't involve me at all, I still had the impression lingering that it should have, if that makes any sense. I had the feeling that maybe I had done wrong by it, so when I got the finished copy, I read it again, and it again did nothing for me. And by this point, I was seeing review colleagues of mine in various journals around the country praising its socks off. And then the advance copy went away to wherever advanced copies go. The finished copy went away, probably to one of you. And I thought no more about it. And then I got the paperback, and the paperback doesn't look like the hardcover. The paperback is beautiful. So I am going to, it's just that shallow. I am going to give the book a third try. This is The Maze at Windermere by Gregory Blake Smith. And look at that for the cover. That is the Penguin paperback of the cover. To me, that is infinitely more attractive than the weird psychedelic stuff that was all in faded browns of the hardcover. So this is going to be a reread. It's festooned with blurbs, none of them mine. So I'm going to give it another try and see. Third time's a charm. I'm not going to read it again. If third time doesn't work for me, then that's it. And then this next one is also a Penguin. This is a Penguin classic. This is a hardcover Penguin classic, very, very ornate thing with original illustrations and gilt pages. This is The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. This is a slim Penguin classic hardcover with the blue pages and blue tinted text and also original illustrations. And the folks at Penguin obviously thought it would be a great pairing to have the foreword for an incredibly popular book written by an artsy-fartsy airhead fraud be written by an artsy-fartsy airhead fraud. So the foreword here is by Insta-poet and notorious literary fraud, Rupi Kaur. So whatever I get from The Prophet, I'll be getting an extra double dose, like a layer of chocolate chips of fraud across the top. But it has been quite some time since I read The Prophet. So, and if Penguin Classic is going to do this, then that's incentive enough for me to read it again. I don't have high hopes. But then this next one is something we saw on this channel, I think, or we heard about it. I can't remember if we might have seen the advanced copy. This is a finished copy. I haven't got to it yet, so I can't wait. This is a booktube book, if ever I heard one. This is by Megan Cox Gurdon, and it is The Enchanted Hour. This is a finished copy of her book about the joys of rediscovering reading aloud to each other. Not necessarily in terms of putting each other to sleep, but rather as an antidote to the noise and jangle and superficiality of the social media world. And I myself tend to think that that counterposes to the jangle of the social media world are disappointingly thin straw men to build anything on, because I don't believe in that. I think people look at all of this stuff and think, well, this is somehow different from the way noise has ever been. It is now, as it always has been, simply a matter of self-control. That's all. But it's a nice stalking horse, and I'm hoping that this book doesn't do much with it. I'm hoping this book studies instead, just concentrates on reading aloud, on the weird wonder of reading aloud to yourself and also to others. So I'm looking forward to it. And then we have a couple of debuts. First one's a thriller, No Exit, by Taylor Adams, who I think is quite young. Yeah, he's quite young. And of course, youth or not, no one should ever call a book No Exit. But that's all right. We have a desolate road in the middle of nowhere. This is on her way to Utah to see her dying mother, college student Darby Thorne gets caught in a fierce blizzard in the Colorado Rockies. With the roads impassable, she's forced to wait out the storm in a remote highway rest stop with no cell phone reception. Inside are some vending machines, a coffee maker, and 4 complete strangers. Desperate to find a signal to call home, the exhausted young art student goes back out into the storm and makes a horrifying discovery. In the back of a van parked next to her car is a little girl locked in an animal crate. Who is the child? Why has she been taken? And how can Darby save her? There is no way to call for help and no way out. One of her fellow travelers is a kidnapper. But which one? You just know that Taylor Adams was on a road trip somewhere and pulled off in some godforsaken rest stop, and that idea came to him fully formed, like Venus out of the head of Jupiter. You just know that happened, and that he ran with it. And I'm not mocking that. The ideas have to come from somewhere, but you just know he didn't just sit and work that out. He had that moment where he passed a van and thought, what would happen if I looked in there and saw someone? What would I do if I couldn't contact the outside world? But anyway, it's like I said with thrillers, you never quite know. I will see. That is a humdinger of a premise. So we'll see what the author does with it. Oh no, I'm sorry. This next one is not a debut. I don't know that we have any other debuts here. But no, this is a bit of a mystery to me. This is 1,000 Sisters by Elizabeth Wayne. And this is the heroic air women of the Soviet Union in World War II. Look at that. Look what it looks like. That's what it looks like. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this out to you. It is You've got textured insets like this, and lots of pictures. There are pictures throughout the thing that are inset in there, and this is by who is this? Balzer and Bray, which I think, if I remember correctly, is a kids imprint for HarperCollins. But I don't know. This seems pretty meaty. It's a kids history book. This is not a novel. This is a history of the night witches, the Soviet airwomen who were just drafted in, no strings attached, just drafted into the Soviet Air Force, and had a stellar record and left an enormous archive behind. It's been subject of a few books that aren't being marketed for kids, and a couple of novels. And I'm looking forward to this, but I don't know what I'm supposed to expect in terms of the demographic of its audience. I'm just going to go into it as a history book and see what it does. I don't get a vibe from it that I should think otherwise. But then this next one, I don't know if we saw this on this channel before. This is by Ha Jin, a novelist who's never done anything at all for me, but this is not a novel. This is a biography. This is The Banished Immortal, a life of Li Bai, who for a previous generation was the poet known as Li Po, whose poetry as Li Po, in English translation, I have very much liked. And this is a biography of him by the novelist. So I don't know quite how that will work. We'll see. If I read a biography by Ha Jin and I love it, then I'm going to be furious. I'm going to be happy that I read a book that I loved, of course, but I'm going to be furious because it's going to give me the strong impression that this author should be writing nonfiction and just shot to fame as a novelist when that's not his métier. But we shall see. Then this next one is, remember I said that the maze at Windermere was a pure triumph of cover redesign? Well, I care about covers on this channel, you know that. I care about covers, and I have often complained about cover design, and especially I've complained about the fact that American cover design seems to lag so far behind, in almost all cases, UK cover design. So if you get the same book, a new book, that's come out in the UK and is now coming out in America, the American cover will almost invariably look worse. And this is a perfect example. This is by Alyssa Evans. It's a novel called Old Baggage, which you may have heard Sean the Book Maniac hyperventilating about on his channel. And you may remember what it looked like from his channel. This is what the American cover looks like. That is not just a faded sepia tone photograph. It's also a faded sepia tone photograph that has been filtered through urine yellow. The novel sounds enchanting. And I won't care what, after a few pages, I won't care what the cover looks like. But still, this is another historical novel from a year that I think is going to be a banner year for historical novels. 1928, riffling through a cupboard, Matilda Simpkin comes across a small wooden club, an old possession that she hasn't seen for more than a decade. Immediately, memories come flooding back to Maddie, memories of a thrilling past which only further serve to remind her of a chafingly uneventful present. During the women's suffrage campaign, she was a militant who was jailed 5 times and never missed an opportunity to return to the fray. Now in middle age, the closest she gets to the excitement of her old life is an occasional lecture on the legacy of the militant movement. I have heard all sorts of things, not just on Sean's channel, but also elsewhere, that this is delightful. So I will be diving in with a great deal of enthusiasm, despite the out-of-focus, sepia-tone, urine-tinted cover. Why not just use the UK cover? I honestly don't know. And then the last book. This will be the last one for this miscellaneous Monday torture session for your TBRs. This is by Brian Hart, and it's a novel called Trouble No Man, that I believe comes out in a paperback. Yeah, this comes out in a paperback. Sounds weird. It intrigues me. In the America of the near future, California has become a desolate wasteland controlled by violent separatist militias and marked by a lack of water and fuel. In a village outside Reno, Nevada, a middle-aged man visits an undertaker and gathers the ashes of his dead wife to bring to Alaska, where their children await. To reach them, the man must go north by bike across a treacherous, violent landscape, his dog his only companion. I don't know anything about this author. He's written one other book, I think. The Bully of Order, and Then Came the Evening. Okay, so he's written 2, and he lives in Idaho for his sins. But I don't think I've ever read him, so this will be my first try, and it seems intriguing. Oh, do we have the bean? Do you want to see your fans? Huh? They want to see you. Oh, there you are. Oh, who's that, baby? Huh? Oh, hello. You're a good girl. Yes, you are. Making headway on your chewy toy. So let's see. Let's try to do a pyramid here. This is 1,000 Sisters, about the night witches of the Soviet Union. No Exit by Taylor Adams. The Enchanted Hour. What have we else here? Golden State by Ben Winters. The Banished Immortal. Trouble No Man. Old Baggage. The Prophet with a new introduction. Building the Great Society by Joshua Zeitz. Let's see here. What else have we got? The Maze at Windermere with a new cover. Midnight Oil and a Cab at the Door by V.S. Pritchett. And The Gardener's Bed book to add to my small but growing book collection on gardening. So there you go. That is, I guess, our Monday reads. Or whatever we're going to call it. Just a bunch of stuff that I'll be reading or thinking about or working on in the next few days. And then we'll do it all over again. Thank you, BookTube.